I hired a private investigator to follow my most brilliant employee. What I found made me spend $20 million completely anonymously. One man I couldn't solve with money, power, or pressure. Ezra Reed was a legend. He solved million-dollar algorithmic problems with a casual keystroke, then vanished every day at 5:30 sharp. No happy hours, no late-night strategy dinners, no explanations. Today, he saved my firm $40 million. I offered him the world. I told him we were dining at Les Bernardins, that I would compensate whatever prior engagement he had. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "My time after 5:30 is not for sale, Miss Cross." I had built a billion-dollar empire by knowing everything about everyone. Ezra Reed was a vault I simply could not crack. So I broke my own rules. I hired a ghost to follow him. I wanted to know where he went, who he saw, and why he left exactly on the dot, every single day. For 3 days I imagined the worst. Was he feeding insider information to a rival firm, tangled in an illicit gambling ring? But on the 4th day, the encrypted dossier arrived. The report wasn't what I expected. No shady back alley meetings, no rival CEOs. Ezra just took the downtown subway to a grim neighborhood, bought a cheap black coffee and a faded balloon. And then he walked into a massive, imposing concrete structure. St. Jude's Pediatric Intensive Facility. The man generating tens of millions for my company was living on a fraction of his salary, and someone inside that hospital was fighting for their life. Before we open Ezra's HR file and uncover the devastating secret he was hiding, we want to hear from you. We are building a global community here at Blood and Roses Chronicles, and we want to know exactly where in the world you are witnessing this collision of power and vulnerability. Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love seeing how far these stories of hidden truths reach. While you're down there, make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button to join the fold. And if you know someone who needs to be reminded that the quietest people often carry the heaviest burdens, share this story with them. Your support is the fuel that keeps these chronicles alive. Now back to the shadows. The narrative I had spun unraveled in an instant. I spent the next morning tearing through Ezra's HR file with the urgency of a woman trying to defuse a bomb. I bypassed standard protocols and used my master executive access. Marital status: widowed. Dependents: Maya Reed. Age: 7. I pulled his payroll records. He made millions for my company, but his direct deposits were fractured the moment they hit his account. Massive wire transfers draining his wealth bi-weekly, all routed to the billing department of St. Jude's. Every minute he refused to work past 5:30 p.m. was a stolen breath of time with a daughter fighting to stay in this world. The CEO who saw everything had been entirely blind. That night, I stood outside room 412, pressing myself against the observation window. Inside, a fragile little girl lay tangled in a web of tubes, and beside her was the legend of Lance Holdings. He wasn't a ruthless analyst here. He was just a father, terrified of the dark, singing to keep the shadows at bay. In my world, weakness was a liability to be exploited. But watching the devotion that fueled his corporate brilliance, I realized this wasn't a weakness. It was an armor far stronger than anything my money could buy. Even through the glass, his instincts were razor sharp. He spotted me. He stepped into the hallway, and the air pressure between us dropped. "What are you doing here?" Ezra asked. I stammered, telling him I just wanted to understand why he always walked away. "So you had me followed. You couldn't accept a simple no, so you violated my privacy to find a pressure point." I tried to explain, but his eyes burned with a fierce, protective fire. "She has cystic fibrosis. Her lungs are failing. Every algorithm I write is just to buy her another day of oxygen. You wanted my secret? Here it is. Now please leave us alone. My time here is not for you," he added. The drive back to my penthouse was a relentless drumbeat of guilt. I had stripped him of his dignity just to satisfy my bruised ego. I couldn't undo what I had done, but I could do what I did best: obliterate an obstacle from the shadows. Late Thursday night, I called my chief financial officer. I ordered him to set up a blind trust with Tier 1 encryption, completely anonymous. When he asked what we were funding, I gave him the order: a hostile takeover of a medical debt portfolio. I liquidated a shell company. No board approvals, no paper trail. Within 48 hours, the machinery of my wealth was fully deployed. The anonymous trust purchased the entire debt portfolio of St. Jude's Pediatric Intensive Care Wing. But I didn't stop there. Using my board seat at a major pharmaceutical conglomerate, I forced through an emergency trial for a cutting-edge respiratory therapy. I ensured Maya Reed was at the absolute top of the recipient list. I didn't tell Ezra. I didn't want his gratitude. I just watched from a distance as the weight slowly began to lift from his shoulders. A week later, Ezra didn't pack his briefcase at 5:29 p.m. Instead, at exactly 5:35, he walked past my assistant and stepped into my office. The hospital administrator called me. He told me an anonymous donor cleared Maya's surgical backlog and moved her to the front of the synthetic lung trial. I kept my eyes glued to my screen, my heart hammering. I told him it was incredible news. I ran a trace on the shell company. Masterful work. But the routing protocols had a signature, the exact same signature used in the European bailout I designed for you last month. He wasn't angry. The defensive wall was gone, replaced by a look of profound, staggering disbelief. He asked me why. I stepped around the desk. I told him I was wrong. I thought power was about making people bend to my will. But when I saw what he was fighting for, I realized my power was entirely useless if I couldn't use it to protect something real. You spent $20 million, anonymously. You weren't even going to tell me. It wasn't a transaction. It was an apology. 6 months later, the markets still fluctuated, and millions still changed hands, but the rhythm had altered. At 5:25 p.m., I closed my laptop. The legend of Lance Holdings and her CEO walked out into the evening air, not as a titan and her analyst, but as two people who had navigated the darkest parts of their worlds to find a shared light. If that final glimpse of Tiana and Ezra finding the light inside that hospital room sent a chill down your spine, then click that like button right now. Subscribe to Blood and Roses Chronicles to join our community for more cinematic journeys into the shadows. Drop a comment below and let's talk about that hard-earned justice. Remember, the world might see someone silent or broken when they look at you today, but never forget, you hold a signal that can change everything. See you on the next one.